Hey everyone, happy Sunday to you. I hope all is well. We're already starting week 4. That's the quarter way mark, right? Once this week is over. I say every week, I hope you've settled into the course, but that's really, you should be by now. Understand that it's your responsibility to have what you need to do this course. Your books, like that's been, up front, you're in a college class. Of course, you're going to need books, right? So keep that in mind. If you don't have your book, Amazon rents them for $40. But that said, that's up to you, right? I can't extend assignments. I can't do any of that because you don't have your materials at this point. So keep that in mind. Coming up this week, you're going to have a quiz, your first quiz. I think they're 25 questions, and it's over the first 3 chapters. And this Blum article, which you're going to read along with chapter 3 today or this week. So be prepared for that. The following week, you just have to read chapter 4. Again, I'm going to encourage you right now as we're getting to the quarter way mark already. Be looking ahead to these major assignments you have in this course. Because they're worth half your grade. If you wait till the last week to do that, you might find yourself in trouble. So a couple of things I want to go over before I get to the Jamal case is with your DBs is, first of all, I was very pleasantly surprised that most of you were really good with, I think everybody actually was really good with using your APA reference. The issue now comes into following the instructions. So they're very clearly laid out in 2 places, right? They're in your syllabus. They're also in your weekly course module, right? So they're both places. The instructions are there on written how to do this. And they're very clear on what the expectations are, what the requirements are, right? And also in your grading rubric in your syllabus that was gone over in the syllabus video, the importance of that. If you want to know your grade or why you got the grade you got, look at your syllabus, look at the grading rubric. That's exactly how you're graded. That's it, right? If you don't use 2 references, you lose points. If you don't have a word count that meets the requirement, you lose points. If you don't follow the APA writing style, you lose points. If you don't respond to 2 peers, you lose points. If it's late, you lose points. Know your due dates, guys. Look, this isn't a just free-for-all. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want. There's things due on certain days. I understand we all have families. We all have jobs. We all have kids. We all have whatever it is we have, right? We all have it. But you still got to be accountable for this, right? So know that as it's very clearly stated in the syllabus and the syllabus videos, quizzes and DBs cannot be made up. So it's really up to you to stay on your game, stay on focus, stay on track. If you don't know something, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help. I've made that clear as well. I'm happy to do a Zoom. In fact, I've done one with a couple of you. I'm happy to do them with you. You have to take the initiative to reach out to me. I have to assume that you know what you're doing if you don't reach out to me, right? That's the only assumption I can make. So as everyone was able to get the APA resource for your textbook, that props to all of you for that. A lot of you skipped out on the second resource. You have to have 2 for your original post. So, on a case like this where it's super easy, obviously, to use the textbook, right, on page whatever, according to, who's the author here? According to Stevens and Smith, right, whatever the date is, blah, blah, blah. That's super easy, right? No problems. So how do you incorporate a second resource into that? Well, now it gets a little more challenging, right? You don't have to go reading 10-page articles or journals or anything. You need 1 sentence, something to support an idea, right? So if you were to say, many of you mentioned informed consent, which I'm going to get to. So good for you all on that. But let's just say you said, something along the lines of, according to Stevens and Smith, 2018, you need an informed consent to disclose any of Jamal's information. You can follow that sentence with do some research, look up somewhere where it talks about informed consent and say, according to Caldwell 2022, informed consent is a priority of any clinician for their client. Whatever, right? It just supports your thought. I hope that makes sense. So that's how you incorporate that. But it has to be done either way. So I know this seems tedious and it seems like, why does it matter? It matters, right? And I'm going to go into why it matters now with this week's work with the Jamal case. So many of you did a great job on this. I didn't grade on specifics. Like if you did the work, did the writing, did it in the proper format, you got all the points. And that's generally how these goes. This course isn't an English class. It's not a math class. It's not like that. But you have to follow the guidelines. And that's important because look at the complexities in this Jamal case. Now, if you think this doesn't happen or it may happen one day, it's not a matter of if it's going to happen. It's when. And it happens more often than you think. Right? You don't know who's coming through your front door as a clinician, right? You have no idea, right? All you can do is I used to have an old professor that would say, I don't get to choose the mix. God does that. I just get to work with it, right? So whatever your belief is, they're fine. But at the end of the day, running a business of helping or being a clinician at a center, wherever you land, however it looks, a social work or whatever you choose, right? You still don't get to choose who you help, right? You have people come in and they're complex. You see how very quickly this innocent counseling session went to a whole lot of problems that could happen, right? So a couple of things is the very first thing I'm going to tell you is know your guidelines. No, since this course is an LCDC course, I'm going to just stick to that and say know your LCDC rules and regulations. Excuse me, I got the hiccups. There's in your Blackboard and any class I teach, there's a tab called LCDC resources. Your rules and regulations are in there. You need to know them. I mentioned this in the syllabus video. You don't need to know them for this class, but you need to know them because they're what governs your license. It's a big deal, right? When you don't know what to do, what direction to go, always start with your rules and regulations, right? Because they'll generally have some sort of solution. Now, they're not always clear either there, right? Which is going to bring me to my next thing is consultation, right? I know that was mentioned in the Jamal study or in the chapter somewhere. I cannot stress this piece enough to you, right? Like I got the counselor hands going. My wife always says this is my counselor hands, triangle hands. Anyway, it's just, I notice when I get serious, this is just automatically comes together like this, right? But for real, like this is probably the two most important things, consultation, right? You have to have peers or supervisors to consult with. I don't care how long you've been in the industry. I don't care how long you've been a clinician. I don't care what kind of license you have, what kind of degree you have. I don't care if it's an associate's degree or a PhD or anywhere in between. You need to consult with other people, other clinicians, right? I just can't stress that enough to you. As far as the CFR42, yeah, that's going to matter. There's rules there. And you'll find what's interesting about this is that you'll find it at working at facilities. For example, I worked at a Memorial Hermann facility. It's no longer a facility. Someone bought it. But at the time, it was a Memorial Hermann facility. So we had our license rules and regulations, which again, I'm always going to refer to first, right? The LCDC rules and regs. But then you had the Memorial Hermann policies and rules and regulations, right? They were a little more strict, in fact. Then we had what's called the Joint Commission rules and regulations. Now, for those that don't know, the Joint Commission is an accreditation body for treatment facilities. Just like a college is accredited, so are treatment centers, at least good ones, right? And so they come with a whole host of different rules and regulations and paperwork stuff, and right. And then there's the NAAC rules, and if you're going for an advanced license like an LPC, they have rules and regulations. While most of them are very similar, there are some differences, and you always want to go by what's more stringent, what's more strict, I would say. Like, for example, as an LCDC, once we stop services, we have to wait 2 years before we can be friends on social media, before we can, engage in any kind of relationship outside of that. LPC, it's 5 years. But then you have your own personal code of ethics, right? And you have your facilities ethics. Your facilities ethics, but Memorial Hermann said never. And I have to go by those, right? Because that's the more stringent. And the reason I don't have to legally, so see, now you get into ethical versus legal. Legally, no, I got to wait the 2 years. Ethically, I mean, in 2 years and 1 day, I could befriend people. But, legally, but more ethically, why would I do that? Because then what happens in 3 years if you had a good relationship with this client and they decide they want to come back into counseling? You've since changed that relationship dynamic and it's not really fair for them. Yes, there's other clinicians, I get it, right? But if you had a good helping relationship, why wouldn't you want to keep that open for them and not really take any chances of messing that up? So you got to think about those things, right? Many of you brought up written consent. So what's called informed consent is something every client should have, right? I don't do anything without my client signing an informed consent paper, and that's all electronic now, but they still read through it and sign it, which goes over everything from my philosophies to my practice rules and regulations to my license to my policies and procedures is what I meant to say a second ago, to, financial stuff, to all the things, everything I want them to be aware of, they need to know, right? And so what I found fascinating with Jamal's case was, then you have duty to warn, but that goes by state, by license, right? So not every state has that. Not every, you got a lot going on in this case. And so I'm going to tie this back into why it's so important you follow these directions on a DB. Like you have to pay attention to detail with your clients, or you will absolutely have the potential to do disservice to them, right? And our number one job, as any type of helper, any type of clinician, I don't care if it's LCDC, MFT, LPC, PhD, I don't care. Your number one priority is to do no harm. They call it non-maleficence. So that's a great word, by the way, too. But it's your number one duty is to do no harm. I don't have to have all the answers as a clinician, right? I don't pretend to know what all the issues are for you, that I don't have the answers there, right? I don't have to, right? I want you to hear me. My job is not to choose for my clients. My job is to walk with them through their choices. Now, that brings me to confidentiality. There are 3 reasons to break confidentiality in the state of Texas, and they are threats of homicide and suicide, abuse of any kind, elderly, handicapped, children, and now I'm going blank, wouldn't you know it? Abuse, suicide, homicide. Holy crap, there's one more. Now I'm totally drawing a blank. I can't believe this. Of course, it would happen on camera. Anyway, I'll get back to that, but there's 3 reasons to break confidentiality, and you need to go over that with every client, right? I think the other one might be legal stuff, a subpoena or something. But all that said is here's the thing. And you got to be careful. Now we get into more nuances with you got to be careful with the suicide, right? Suicidal ideation is not uncommon. Doesn't mean I get the right to break confidentiality. So how do you know when to do that? Because you know if there's a plan, right? There's a difference to say, I don't feel like I belong here. I'm having these thoughts. Great. We don't have to, you don't run off to report that. Again, you'll do more harm in most cases than good there. Right now, if someone says, I don't feel good, I don't have having these thoughts, I'm going to do this, and here's how I'm going to do it. Different story altogether. Absolutely, you have the right to break confidentiality then, right? So keep that in mind. There's so many just nuances to counseling that you'll learn along the way, right? But this is Your counselor's in training already. You don't have to wait for your practicum to be a counselor in training. You're already a counselor in training. Make no mistake, right? And as I've stated with these DBs in the word count, you want to give your clients enough information and enough feedback to where they're tracking with you, but not give them so much that you lose them, or not enough to where they're still confused, right? So word counts matter. That's to start getting you in the habit of being concise, saying what you want to say, and really helping you to just condense your thoughts into the meat of what you're trying to say, and rather than the fluff, right? So that said, there's also like deadlines. Look, what are you going to do when you get overwhelmed as a counselor? You're going to just cancel your client, say, I'm not going to do it. You can't do that, guys. So you have to start really working on things like self-care. Take advantage of the helpers we have here at UST. There's lots of resources here. Several of you have reached out to me, and hopefully I've been able to help you. I'm always happy to help. But basically, long story longer, you've done a great job here so far. You just need to follow the guidelines. If there's something you don't know, please reach out to me. But again, I want to encourage you, please start looking forward to these bigger assignments. It's just very important you don't wait on those, and you start really looking at that. So I have 3 dogs, and the reason I say that is if you want 5 bonus points, email me, or up to 5. If you have 100 in this class, you don't have anywhere for me to add bonus points. But if you have a 1 point off, you can get 1 point, or if you have 5 somewhere, I'll add 5. Email me the number of dogs I have by Tuesday night, and just by Tuesday night. If I wake up Wednesday and you haven't sent it, I'm not going to accept it after that. So guys, I hope you have a great week, and we'll talk soon.